All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. This is Jody Barker, Director of the Area Agency on Aging. We will commence our February 22nd, 2024 Regional Advisory Council meeting. It is currently 10 a.m. and we do have a quorum. And so we will call this meeting to order. I am Jody Barker, again, Director of the Area Agency on Aging. We'll go through some introductions and get started with our meeting. And so we'll start first with members in the room. To my right, let you get started.
Debbie Levin Stankiewicz, Colorado Springs Vice Chair, presently.
Laura Cronick, Town of Monument.
Gordon Rick, City of Fountain.
Melody Hanna, Pikes Peak AAA.
Melissa Martz, Pikes Peak AAA.
Thank you. Jared, would you mind calling roll for members online, please?
I'll be happy to. Let's start first with Jim Woodard.
Yes, it's Jim Woodard representing Keller County.
Thank you. Maria Cordova.
Maria Cordova with the Independence Center, serving El Paso, Teller, and Park counties.
And Mary Kep.
Mary Kep, appointed representative from El Paso County.
And that is all the RAC members we have online.
Great. Thank you very much. That concludes point number one. Number two is an update to our RAC chair and vice chair positions. As you know, we started off the year with Marilyn Massey continuing a second year in the chair position with Debbie Levis Stankiewicz coming in as vice chair. However, Marilyn is experiencing some health issues right now and has asked to step down as chair and swap positions with Debbie. And so today we will make that official. We will swap Marilyn and Debbie's roles. And so from here through the rest of the meeting, our vice chair is now stepping into the RAC chair position and will lead this meeting. So Debbie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. So we're going to be on number 3, agenda approval. And I would like a motion to approve the minutes. And
So moved.
Take their name for the
and if you could state your name, if you're
Mary Kep, so moved for the approval of the agenda.
Jim
Laura
Woodard.
Cronick, second.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion? Okay, we'll go on. And now we're going to approve the minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes as written. Gordon Rick.
A second?
Yes, Mary Kep, second.
Okay. Any questions? Discussion on the minutes? All except, and so approved. Well,
You got to ask.
oh, I have to ask for a vote to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
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 Great, approved. Okay, and now we're on number 5, which is public comments. And we do have Jason DeBueno who wants to make some comments. So if he could step up to the mic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the committee members for allowing me to take a few minutes, I think 3 minutes, right, Jared, to be able to share. You know, when I get on a soapbox, you'll have to cut me off. But just real quickly, what I wanted to share, right, Jody, quit using my time. What I wanted to share with you is that I wanted to give you a copy of a summary of a independent review of what's happened at Silver Key called the Hope Report, lovingly called the Hope Report. And what we were able to demonstrate through this partnership with Colorado Springs Fire Department and NAMI Colorado Springs is the impact of Silver Key. Silver Key not being in existence would mean a $25 million impact to the Medicare and Medicaid system. We demonstrate by being a $5 million company, we have that level of capacity. So we would be able to reduce unnecessary emergency room travel and ambulance travel. So this is an important document. The reason why I share this with you is because this has informed some of our strategies going forward. And the title that I'd given Jody for being on the agenda today is a leadership change at Silver Key. What I want to share with you, and I think it may be a surprise to many of the committee members, that we have over 30 different contracts and grants that we have in our organization to bridge between the support that the AAA is able to provide and the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments for the services at Silver Key. But we have a whole range of other funding streams that come into play. Each one of them have complexities and commitments, and it's just grown to the point where administratively it was very much a challenge. So I'm glad to report that Lori Wood, who was our Chief Operating Officer, is moving to be in our Chief Grants and Compliance Officer, because we have so many different complexities with all of these fundings and to be able to bridge them together. Also with that, what I really want to bring forward is the reason why the Hope Report is an important piece is because what I'm very concerned about is that nonprofits, the faith community, many who do a lot of good work in this community are struggled to be able to find a resource that's sustainable. While we enjoy and appreciate the support from the AAA, the reality is that, again, if we went away, the systems that would be impacted, Medicaid, Medicare, insurers, would be impacted in big ways. And with that, we have got to figure out how do we become more relevant and committed and interconnected with the healthcare system. So I'm pleased to report that one of the leadership changes as Lori steps into this role and moves more into that role, we have hired a Chief Health Operations Officer. The Chief Health Operations Officer is formerly the Medical Director of Public Health. She's an MD. This is Dr. Robin Johnson. And what she's going to do is be able to be that translator between a social service entity like Silver Key and the formal healthcare system, so that we are no longer adjunct to the healthcare, but we are part of the fabric. And the reason I share this with you, and I share this with all the providers that are on the meeting today, if you want to join along with us to be able to expand and enhance that voice, that we've got to be able to bring forward a larger call for solution. And I think that Silver Key with Dr. Johnson, can I introduce you real quick, Dr. Johnson? Coming on board to Silver Key is going to lay that path forward for Silver Key to use her voice and strength in the community to be that change agent that we need. And I think that many of the faith community, many of our partners through the AAA could be alongside with us, and we invite that. And if you just want to introduce yourself real quick.
Sure. Good morning. I'm Dr. Robin Johnson. I'm an emergency physician by training and practiced at Memorial Central for 24 years. During that time, I mean, the ER is a great litmus test for what's happening in culture. I really got involved in access to care and became a healthcare advocate, landing at the fire department for a period of time. And we developed CARES and we developed CRT. During my tenure, we actually developed their community and public health division. And so a lot of what Jason is talking about, these were seeds that were getting to be planted to not have us work in silos, but rather integrate into a true fabric for the health and flourishing of our community and our members. And so having moved from the ER into public health, I feel like now this is just such a great opportunity to bring those skills to bear in a setting in which I think our community is ripe for these opportunities, and to have some systems change that will be meaningful, not just for today, but for generations to come. So thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And one other thing I'll share with you is that in the proposals that came forward from the TRS for the CAC to review, again, we appreciate the proposed allocation to Silver Key. And while it's always frustrating to me when I see that there's so much need out there and the TRS has got to make some intentional decisions to be able to meet that need, I saw that the Colorado Springs Fire Department was one of the new candidates on the list. And I do think that this demonstrates in this report the wisdom of a group like this, that we have to be able to manage the resources. And I believe what you will see both in the work that Silver Key does and in our partnership with the fire department, you will continue to see this kind of opportunity to serve those that are so marginalized in our community. So thank you for taking that information from the TRS in their review. And I do hope that the CAC is able to support the recommendations that have come forward. Again, Silver Key is grateful for what we saw in the recommendations. And I know that I've probably gone over 3 minutes, but I certainly can answer any questions unless I'm gone, Jody, and I'm glad to leave.
Well, thank you, Jason, and welcome aboard, Dr. Johnson. We appreciate your time in the community, and we were just reminiscing very briefly at the beginning of COVID. Area Agency on Aging was invited to be part of some of the public communication out to our older adults to try to allay some fears of what being told to stay home really meant and how they could still participate in the community, or at least get out and not be afraid to open their windows and get some sunshine, you know. And so I really appreciate that very brief time that we had at the beginning of COVID, and really excited that you're now part of our network more directly. So thank you very much, and well done, Jason and Silver Key, and Lori. I can't see you past the post, but congratulations on your new role. I know it's all going to be great for Silver Key and our providers. We do have a question from member Mary Kep.
Yeah, my question, both of these representatives mentioned the fire department, but somewhere along the way, I have not gained the knowledge on what it is that the fire department does in relationship to the RAC. And I'm also concerned about the fact that if they're doing it in Colorado Springs, why aren't they doing it in the other communities in El Paso County?
Mary,
Right. Well, perfect. Not quite segue, but we're actually going to have members of the fire department team that are referred to today as part of our presenters presentations a little bit later this morning. So you'll get to learn more, Mary, and maybe you'll learn something that you can go knock on the door there in Fountain Valley and encourage them to replicate there. So
well, now that we've got Rick can go knock on the doors in Fountain Valley. I'm concerned
sure,
about
that's true.
Communities like Calhan and Falcon and what's that other
Sure.
one? But there's many communities, Manitou Springs, for goodness sake.
Sure.
I don't know what the representation is that these communities have.
Yeah, they're all good questions. Robin, please, or Dr. Johnson.
So I don't know if this is really my place, but having been medical director over that community and public health division, part of the challenge that is presented is that Colorado Springs Fire Department has jurisdiction over Colorado Springs. So when we had our mobile mental health and wanted to expand it out into the county, we had to work with the sheriff's office. There were 18 different fire districts, if I'm recalling correctly, within just El Paso County. And so if we start talking about some of our other counties, we have other fire districts to bring in. They do have a medical team of oversight that has come together to help with EMS protocols being standardized. If the other communities are really gung-ho about what CARES is doing and what is happening with CRT or Beacon, which you might be familiar with, that may be a place to start. And I'm happy to help connect through you, Jody, anybody that might want to connect with that EMS team and see who they would connect with to begin to have advocacy for their own communities.
Great. Thank you so much. And Mary, I think you've got a couple of good questions already in the process to ask the folks from Colorado Springs Fire Department when they're here a little bit later. So thank you very much for that.
And thank you to Johnson for her reply because I got some things from that too.
Great. That's great. Jared, do we have any other public comments, hands up or by email?
I'll just ask for those who are online who are not RAC members, please use the raise hand function if you'd like to make public comment. In the meantime, I'll just say that we did not receive any additional requests for public comment, and we did not receive any submitted public comments that we would have submitted to the council members before the meeting. And as I have stalled for time a little bit, I have not seen any more hands go up, so I think we're good to proceed.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And Madam Chair, I will hand it back to you to move to item 6.
Thank you. Mary, you beat me to it because number
I'm
6
sorry.
is recognizing the City of Fountain appointee, Gordon Rick. And he's sitting over here to my right. And I don't know if you have any comments that you would like to make. Introduce yourself and
So my name is Gordon Rick. I'm on the city council for the city of Fountain. I've lived in El Paso County for about 30 years now. Spent 20 years in the Army, 22 years in the private sector. So I am retired now. I was an alternate on the PPACG CAC for 2 years. I was on the Planning Commission in Fountain for 7 years, and I've been on the City of Fountain City Council for a little over 2 years now. The mayor expressed a need for someone to represent Fountain at the RAC, and fortunately I have some time and can do that, and I'm glad to be here and looking forward to learning from everyone. Thank you.
thank you.
Well, Madam Chair, on the next item, information item, we do have a Colorado Springs Fire Department Aging in Place program. However, they won't be here until a little bit after 11. I would like to recommend that we go ahead and move through the agenda and pause when they arrive, and then we can continue from
Great.
there after their presentation.
Sounds good. And I'd like to just answer one of Mary's questions because all of the when you the PPACG has a list of all the openings of the various committees, and all of the towns are listed. So there are many towns that could have members on the RAC, and that is put out every I think month when the PPACG meets. And that's, I think, one of the ways in which we got Gordon and Fountain to name someone to participate. So hopefully over time we'll get other members who are willing to participate. Good, that was a good point, Mary. Okay, so moving on the information items, Maria is now the head of our membership committee, and I don't know if she has any comments or anything new that she'd like to share with the RAC.
I don't really at this time. One thing I would like to do is I attend several resource meetings, so I would like to get the word out about all of the openings that we do have in El Paso County, and including Teller and Park, actually.
Great, thank you, Maria.
And this is, Madam Chair, I'd like to just jump in for a second. So this is Melissa with the Pikes Peak Area Agency on Aging, and I just want to compliment Maria's efforts to do more outreach. Maria's on the road a lot, and so she is a great membership chair for us for this upcoming year, which is wonderful. Maria and I did meet with Gordon and gave him kind of an overview of the RAC and kind of what to expect, and got to know him a little bit more. I will be hosting a formal orientation with him, and Maria most likely will be attending that with me, which will be great. Sometimes the chair of the RAC also attends those orientation meetings, so I'll get the date out once that's set, and people who can join are welcome to participate in that. I also want to give an update today about Marilyn, our immediate past chair, who's now our vice chair. And Jody did allude that she's having some health issues. She currently is on the path to do some rehab. She had a fall and had a minor pelvic fracture just 2 days ago. And so she is in the process of being moved to rehab today. I'm waiting to hear where she's going to end up. She and I are on the phone together, which is great. she's, as we all know, quite a trooper. So hopefully she's going to rehab well and be able to make it on a cruise in June is her goal, let alone to come back to the rack and be chairing the rack. I do have with me today a card that I want to pass around to the folks who are here. And again, if Silver Key and Invita, if you guys want to write a little word of wisdom to our rack chair, Marilyn, some of you guys have interfaced with her, you're welcome to add to the card as well. And we'll get some support out to Marilyn. So just wanted to give people an update on that. And again, really excited for Maria to be the membership chair as we go into the next year. So thanks.
Thank you, Melissa. And I would also like to add that Marilyn was chair all of last year. And we do allow a person to be chair for a second year, and she had graciously taken that on. So I'm sad that she can't continue, but I know she's very involved and will, when she's ready, be able to be online and be involved in our meetings. So we want to just thank Marilyn for being our chair last year. And I look forward to taking over this year. Next, we're gonna talk about our strategic review committee. And I think we have Laura, who's going to make a little presentation. We had our, that subcommittee has quarterly meetings. We recently had a quarterly meeting and made some discussions, and Laura's going to kind of summarize some of that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What we did was we tried to focus on essentially two of the broader areas that need the most work. Transportation being one, and information, thank you, excuse me, information and assistance being the second. Starting with the transportation, we had a lot of discussion about the difficulty in addressing a lot of this, the breadth of the county, the breadth of all the counties, and the lack of funding to really support the needs. And you know, what's the answer? Well, and Jason alluded to this in his presentation. It's hard. It's just difficult, and there's got to be a way, and we just have to kind of keep beating the horse, as it were. And any ideas, suggestions, advice, whatever, certainly can be entertained. I think that the biggest area that we focused on were Teller and Park counties, given their needs and how they interact with, for example, Denver versus El Paso County or the Springs. So there's a breadth of needs here, and definitely for the urban piece of this, when we talk about how we address the needs, we came up with, during our discussions, a need for training, retraining of providers and participants, you know, because we have certain expectations, and maybe those expectations are not realistic. Perhaps we need to look at them again and readdress them, or take a different focus. The information and excuse me, and assistance piece of this was focused on broadband. We all know that that's an issue. And getting broadband companies to provide access to some of the, again, we're dealing with the urban, the sprawl, the outliers. We all have it here, but we don't necessarily, they don't have it in Park or Teller, you know, those areas. So there is the broadband work that's been adopted by COA for this specific area, for the aging, the advocacy for the aging, that kind of thing. Help me here, Melissa, on the the presentations and the plans going forward, I think we had discussion about CDOT to present, and that I guess Andy was going to be part of a larger transportation discussion, broadband transportation, blah, blah.
Well said. Yes.
thank
Yeah. So I guess the other piece that came up during the strategic review subcommittee was acknowledging the bigger picture and engagement around our state having a plan for broadband and getting broadband out there. And our executive director, Andrew Gunning, has been interfacing on some of those levels. And then again, with the PPACG, such a huge part of what PPACG does is transportation. And if you're dealing with broadband and roads are kind of going hand in hand. And so the strategic review subcommittee had suggested we have a little bit more of some content be presented to the RAC at some point to bring those things to light in a way that none of us really quite know. Jody.
One thing I'd like to share that has come up in several of the last PPACG board meetings was enabling communities to bring in broadband by reducing the right-of-way cost along the interstates, along the highways. And so CDON has received permission to reduce those rates to really just a bare minimum break even for maintenance and that kind of thing. So the communication and the conversations have been quite fruitful and quite productive already, even in the early stages. And so that's really exciting to hear, because some of that was really counterproductive to being able to bring broadband into smaller communities using the right of ways along the highways, because that does have to be buried. And so just wanted to bring you all up to date with that as well. So that's an exciting development that's somewhat recent and in process. So just wanted to make sure you all are aware of that as well. And I think there's a lot more to come as we hear more around the process.
Thank you, Jody.
So I'm going to go ahead and make a few more comments
Okay.
to add on to what Laura had said. The other part that has to do with broadband. So the Pikes Peak Commission on Aging, which is a offshoot of Age Friendly Colorado Springs, which eventually became Age Friendly for the Pikes Peak region, and the Pikes Peak Commission on Aging, housed here at the Council of Governments. They met just yesterday, and they have 4 overarching goals for the next 4 years. And one of them has to do with healthcare in the rural areas, and it ties directly to broadband. And so yesterday, Commissioner Amy Mitchell, who's also a Park County commissioner, as well as the Commission on Aging member or commissioner, talked a little bit about their plans from the Commission on Aging side to link healthcare and broadband together up in the Park County area. And so that was also a tie-in with the Strategic Review Subcommittee to potentially bring the Commission on Aging to present as well, to talk a little bit more about what they're planning to do with that particular goal, as well as maybe other goals that align with our 4-year plan. So it's nice to see those pieces all coming together. The other part that we talked about at the Strategic Review Subcommittee around transportation was just really being able to see the alignment with the Strategic Review Subcommittee calling out priorities, and then seeing that come through with the Technical Review Subcommittee and the recommendations for the funding for the next 4 years, specifically around transportation, and really making tough decisions where sometimes, and we'll get into this with the TRS shortly, some program areas were being reduced with the idea of really wanting to focus on transportation and bring resources there, but also bringing in a potential new service provider with Carepool. And so the Strategic Review Subcommittee kind of commented about that a little bit. And it was just really a great meeting, and really want to encourage other RAC members, and I see these hands being held up, but really want to encourage more RAC members to really get involved with the SRS. because a lot of really great conversation is evolving out of that and really watching the 4-year plan. So I'm grateful for the people who showed up and the comments. And then I think Maria had her hand up first, so I'll turn it over to Maria, and then I'll also turn it back over to Debbie, Madam Chair. But Maria, go ahead.
Yeah, just in regards to broadband, there's also the Colorado Digital Access Plan and the Colorado Digital Inclusion plans. I just threw the links in the chat for both of those. I did join in the meeting in January for digital inclusion, and so I would be happy to share any information. I'm planning on joining any other meetings that they have to see what resources are available to people. So when they do get broadband, they also know how to use digital tools so that they can access things like medical appointments or anything else. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And I would hopefully also like to get more involved with SRS as well. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Maria. Mary? You have a
My
comment? Go
question,
ahead.
I do. My question went back a ways. When I think it was Maria mentioned that there was going to be training and retraining for some of the agencies that are part of the SRS. And I'm wondering is there any plan or procedure to get training and retraining for some representatives from these communities that don't have a RAC representative yet, that we could bring them in, like maybe the mayor could ask somebody to come and tell them about the RAC and what's going on with the RAC and encourage them to actually appoint their representative as Gordon has been appointed?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Yeah, that's actually a big process. I will point out that the two committees under Pikes Peak Area Agency on Aging, including the RAC as well as the the Commission on Aging, are really the only two committees within the PPACG structure that have membership subcommittees with a chair who is actively involved in that membership outreach. And so I think we are well on our way. I will also recognize that Mayor Sharon Thompson of Fountain, City of Fountain, who is the PPACG board director, and she actually points out at every single meeting that the board of director members need to review that list and see the openings. And in fact, at last week's meeting, we had a report from the Pikes Peak Commission on Aging chair and past chair. And as it turned out, we had several members of the the board of directors who reached out actually during the meeting and then after the meeting as well, to request some follow-up on what they needed to do to make sure that they could appoint a member to one of the open slots. So there's a lot going on kind of behind the scenes that you may not see or hear immediately. I would encourage members of the RAC committee, the RAC though, that if you are aware of someone who may be a good candidate, to introduce them to Maria and to Melissa. Maria is our membership chair, but Melissa is the staff liaison to the committees and can help sort that process and get them connected into the whole process. So does that answer your questions, Mary? I would encourage everyone to be part of that process. This isn't a load for Maria and Melissa entirely.
May I reach out by email or whatever form I can find to leadership in these smaller communities and ask them if they even know what the RAC is and what it can do for them if they get involved?
Yeah, that's actually part of our regular process, because every single member of our board of directors is from those communities. They are mayors, they are council members, they are commissioners. I attend every single one of those meetings. We provide some outreach, myself or staff provide outreach and make sure that they know that, if we know someone, for example, that's going on in the Woodland Park area right now, we have a couple of candidates, and so we are taking the steps to reach out to those in Woodland Park who ultimately have to make that decision. It doesn't necessarily, we don't necessarily have to wait for those communities to express interest. If we know of someone, we will bring that up to those communities and to those board members responsible for those appointments. So yes, it's definitely a moving project all the time, and we're not sitting back waiting. We're actively engaged and involved in that process.
And Jody, I'd like to jump in and make another comment here in terms of the fact that we do have a couple of folks on the RAC who have been appointed by their jurisdictions. And what I would like to do is get those individuals together with Jody, possibly with Jared as well, and myself, to kind of talk about what that role looks like and what information as appointees they might want to bring back to their jurisdictions and how that might kind of work. So Mary, stay tuned for that, and other folks who've been appointed by their jurisdictions. Let's work on getting together and having a planning meeting around that. I think that would really bring us to another level. So
Very
stay
positive.
tuned.
I like that.
Stay tuned. Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Any other comments, questions? I just wanted, Gordon.
Sorry for the question. The spreadsheet that we have with the breakdown, does that come from the Strategic Review Committee or the?
No, that is from the Technical Review Subcommittee, which we are going to move into next. I had one other comment, and I didn't see Laura back there, but she's here. And I don't remember where I read this, but Boostang is going to possibly have another route, I think, from Teller and Park counties into Colorado Springs. They're looking, do you know anything about that? I'm not sure where I read it. Who?
So me. Okay, it's still on. Right now, Bustang is kicking off their transit plan. So they do their transit plan every 5 years. It is something that was identified as a need through our Tri-County study that we completed almost 2 years ago now. And so it's in the infant stage, but it's something that we've been advocating for quite some time. PPACG has. So there's actually quite a bit of change in the planning department too at CDOT's Department of Transit and Rail. So I think one of a great segue to the, or great ask of the RAC on this point is, helping us from a local perspective raise the voice of that need because of the just general transportation, right? Not just seniors, but general transportation of folks up the 24 corridor. There is also in the news just this week a reduction of Bustang services. That reduction from Colorado Springs is really going to the Denver Tech Center. I'm trying to think about the other stop. But they were stops that were not heavily used. And so that reduction, I don't believe, is going to be very impactful. It hasn't reduced the number of trips for Bustang from our area. And I apologize, we were making a lot of noise back here, but we were talking a little bit about the new provider care pool that we will be discussing in the TRS conversation and talking about those challenges of getting seniors to Denver for medical services and those types of things. So that's sort of the update on it. It's in the infant stage of them potentially planning a route up 24 with Bustang.
So it looks like it may become a reality. I mean, I'm glad they're talking about it for
Well,
sure.
It's what they put together is actually a 10-year plan. And so we don't know where that may fall in that 10-year plan. But ultimately, Cat's not super out of the bag that that's actually going to occur. They literally just hired their consultant company that's working on that plan about 3 weeks ago. So, the recommendations have not been fully vetted. So they're right now they're doing the existing conditions analysis of Bustang. I will tell you some of their priorities at this point with Bustang is increasing the frequency of the route on 285, which goes from actually for our area, it goes from Fairplay into Denver, which has been a route that has been heavily used for commuters, for, folks getting into Denver for any kind of service or any kind of recreational thing. So that is a positive because right now, Fairplay, the route that goes through Fairplay has not been super helpful in a sense of service oriented needs because you can't complete a trip in a day. You have to stay in Denver and then head back. And so the frequency of increasing frequency there will really help the Park County residents for those that need to get into Denver for, groceries, anything like that. So
I can't remember where I read it. I get sometimes a review from KRCC stuff, and maybe that's where I read it, but it looked good to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's a positive thing that, it's one of the great things that PPACG being both the AAA and the transportation department upstairs, kind of being able to coordinate some of these communication needs from not just the area agency on aging perspective, but also just general transportation needs for our area. And we've been hounding that. Seems like every conversation that I'm in when it comes to Bustang, I'm like, hey, we did this in the Tri-County study and we identified this as a need. Just continuing to lift that need to folks at CDOT. So, but it does take the community to support a service like that. If they implement a service and they don't see a lot of fruitfulness coming out of it and usefulness coming out of it, then it is something that they reduce. And that's what we're kind of seeing from the conversations about reducing the service up to the Denver Tech Center from here. So more to come on that. As I get more information about it, I'll share it out with the RAC because I think it is something that overarchingly is a need for our area and great for Melissa told me a story about actually her sister used to ride bus. She rode Outrider, I think, or a Bustang from what was it, Alamosa or Los Animas. And she used to ride with a group of older adults that would come into Colorado Springs and have their like heyday shopping day, stay in Colorado Springs, and then turn around and go back to Los Animas. And so there is some opportunities there just for recreation and socialization that Bustang provides. And seniors get a discount using Bustang, which is cool.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that information. Moving on, under information items, D, which is the TRS subcommittee, which is technical review subcommittee, Gordon. And I want to say that this is the committee that reviews the proposals that come in through the RFP process. And we met on February 1, and I just want to thank all of those people who participated on that committee for putting in all the time that they put in to review all of those proposals. The subcommittee basically reviewed all of those proposals, and we accepted the recommendations of the staff, and I'm going to let Jody talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I thought I would highlight kind of the schedule. It is there in the agenda. And so the TRS did meet with staff on February 1st, but to Debbie's point, there were a lot of hours leading up to that, both in staff time as well as our TRS members. And so we are so appreciative of our TRS members taking the time to read through the proposals that were received, as well as some of our initial recommendations, and then joining us for a very substantial meeting to discuss the recommendations and to provide their approval for moving forward. But just want to give a little bit of the schedule and what's happening with these recommendations, because these recommendations, the recommendations, actually, I will back up on myself here. The recommendations within the proposed spreadsheet that's in your packet, as well as for those who are here in the room, does have a couple of minor changes. I will allude to those as we get further in the process and the discussion today. But just wanted to share that the additional FTA 5310 funding recommendations are not in this packet because they are part of the conversation with TRS, but ultimately follow a slightly different track in the process. And so those recommendations go before the Transportation Advisory Committee. That's the TAC. And the FTA rules, the Federal Transit Authority rules, do mandate a 30-day comment period for those RFPs and funding recommendations. And so the recommendations went before the TAC last week and are now in that 30-day comment period. We will be taking these recommendations before the PPACG board in March at their meeting. That'll be the second Wednesday of March. We will take all of the recommendations, both the FTA recommendations and AAA recommendations, before the board and officially request that 30-day comment period. The RAC will review those. In fact, we will actually call a TRS meeting towards the end of that to review any comments that may have been submitted. And this will come before the RAC in the April meeting. And I will share that in April, we are planning to do a provider fair. So providers who are here in the room and online, be getting your materials together. We'll do our first, we'll do a provider fair here in the big meeting room as we look forward into May for Older Americans Month. But the RAC will hear any potential changes or updates for during the April meeting and provide final vote. We will then take that final vote to the PPACG board in May, and we will finalize our contracts and be ready to execute with a July 1, 2024 date to begin contracts. That timeline is we will be sticking to that timeline, but there's a lot of behind the scenes work going on. In fact, providers, you will start to hear from us if you haven't already here in the probably early next week about some things to begin preparing to make sure that we can execute your contracts by July 1. Another thing I'd like to share is, as you note in the agenda, the packet there, our memo, it does show that right now we began working with a dollar figure of $5,543,000 $409. That is an estimate only. That is an estimate based on last year's combined state and federal allocation. It also accounts for the end of the homestead tax exemption funding that AAAs were receiving over the last 5 years, as we are in the last using the last bit of those dollars. So this is an estimate only. Everything that we'll be doing, it's important to understand that that is a working number. It may change up. It may change down. And most importantly, for our providers to hear that we're not sure this is the final number, that we do expect changes. There have been broader discussions, and we have shared this with providers during our recent quarterly provider meetings. There is discussion that federal funding, because of the continuing resolution that we're currently in under the federal budget process, could actually revert to 2019-2020 funding standards. And so if so, this number will be considerably less. So not knowing the final number obviously makes it challenging, but we have to start somewhere because our budgeting and planning process, as you can see, can take between 4 and 6 months to get through to make sure that we can start with a July 1 contract date. So our starting number was $5,543,409. I will point out that we have one provider who did not reapply this year, and that was Mount Evans Hospice. We had 4 new applicants, one who we have worked with in the past, who took about a 3-year hiatus as they focused in other areas, but they did reapply with us this year, and that is Brothers Redevelopment. Carepool is another new one who you've heard a little bit about today. The City of Colorado Springs Fire Department for their Advanced Case Management Plan has applied, as well as Colorado Health Network with some of their case management and screening process. So you can look through these recommendations. The evaluation really began with looking at overall cuts. There's just no way to get around that. It's been alluded to today already by Jason, and I appreciate that. That is something that knowing that our funding may be less than it was in the last fiscal year, we just don't want to be surprised and be able to manage this as realistic as possible. So at first we looked at some overall cuts. We also looked at increases or decreases given to services based on 4-year plan priorities. And that also included the strategic review subcommittee priorities work that they did along with the 4-year plan work in the past year and a half. We also look overall at the current funding usage rates. And so when we look at spend down and we can see that an organization is not spending their funds, that does raise some red flags. And so sometimes we're aware of that because of conversations that we're having with providers, and we do try to stay in close contact with our providers to determine what those, why those may not fall into a perfect 12th of the year usage. But we also look at overall compliance with the contractual processes and how are they doing as according to the contract with us. How are they in compliance with our fiscal assessment process, our program assessment process? Are they responsive to the staff when there are needs for information? And so, and then we also look at their overall funding allocation from the previous year. Did it seem to suit the work that was being done? So the breakdown now through this final amount was $3,410,227 to contracted providers, $2,061,691 for AAA services. And we did reserve, there's an update, and this will be expressed in the final piece that gets posted, but there is still a $51,491,000 remaining in the reserve. That typically will get allocated based on needs. It may be allocated to the current contracted providers, or it may be allocated to a new provider. For example, right now, we have been without an audiology program for two years now, and we are continuing to have those conversations with audiology providers. And so we do have a reserve of $50,000 in case we are able to bring someone on board for that process. The other thing that I would like to show is that the allocation for Area Agency on Aging services, we took a hard look at our own service and our own funding usage in this last couple of years, and moved some of our funds that we have normally kept somewhat flat, but we did move those into the larger pot to our program providers. And so some of that went to bring on 3 of the 4 new providers. So for example, with Brothers Redevelopment, we made a proposal of $50,000. As you can see there, their request actually was $350,000. We also made recommendation for $50,000 to the Care Pool program. Their original request was $100,000. And the City of Colorado Springs Fire Department, for their special program, we made the recommendation of $75,000. You can see that their actual request was $385,695. I will note, and we did share this with the TRS in advance of our meeting, that we actually reached out to those 3 new providers to say, if this gets approved, can you use this amount during your as part of your work? And so we did have conversation. We wanted to make sure that it was viable. And if they turned around and said, no, we can't really use that, we need we need more, we need a larger amount, that we could reallocate that as part of the TRS discussion. And so we did receive positive responses from those 3 providers. For the Colorado Health Network, they are doing some amazing work, but it is very, very narrow scope. And so we felt that we could not provide the level of support this time. And we will be in contact with them as we go through the process, as we will with the rest of our providers. But we will encourage them to apply in the future. So for members, and I will share that we actually drew away from PPAAA budget a little over $200,000, and so very comfortable with making these recommendations into bringing on these 3 providers that have somewhat niche or niche, depending on how you might pronounce that at home, these very specific needs and how they can be used in the community. And it ultimately serves as a way to expand services that are already being provided across the community, but in a very, very specific way. So I will ask the RAC members who are here in the room or who are online, if there are any questions. And of course, the TRS committee, as mentioned, has spent a lot of time in this process. And if you're hearing interesting things that you would like to be involved in the TRS process, you are certainly welcome to join for future discussions. The next time the TRS will probably meet outside of this process. The new TRS would be if we receive carryover funding, which we will typically learn about in October, November, and we will recruit TRS members to join the current TRS team. And so there's the next opportunity outside of this process. Yes, Madam Chair.
And I would just like to add that I have been the chair of the TRS committee, and I will not be doing that with these new involvements that I have to do. So for people to keep in mind on the RAC, that that if you're interested, maybe you're interested in becoming the new chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members of the committee? We will not be taking a formal vote today, as we will be moving into the requested 30-day period for public comment. And of course, questions can always come to us. If there are questions or either providers or RAC members or other members of the community would like to submit questions or comments through the public comment process, they would either send an email to ppacg@ppacg.org. I'll repeat that. And that's ppacg@ppacg.org. Jared, would you mind throwing that in the chat? Or they might submit by letter to 14 South Chestnut Street, Colorado Springs, Colorado, 80905. And we will need to have those in hand well in advance of the April meeting. And I will give you that date here in just a moment. Yes, Madam Chair. Oh.
We have a question over here from the board.
Yes, Mr. Rick.
Yes, thank you. Apologize if I'm not up to date. I'm looking at the spreadsheet and there's a lot of information, a lot of good information, a lot of details. What I would ask is, would it be possible at the end of the sheet to list our strategic objectives, how much money has been requested that goes toward each strategic objective, and how much money we're approving? That way we can look at it from a big picture standpoint to say, is the money we are allocating lining up with our strategic objectives?
Well, I will tell you what, as a TRS member, that is exactly what happens. We review the 4-year plan. That is our strategic plan. So when you hear us talk about 4-year plan, that is our strategic planning process. And so we have that actual document. And before you leave today, you're going to get to go home with a 208-page bound document that you can learn more about us. Yes, exactly. So, but yeah, you are right on track. And that is exactly what the TRS reviews. The staff reviews that. That's how we plan the reprioritization of the funding and make those determinations based on our strategic planning process. So thank you very much.
Although I don't think we have specific amounts for each area of the strategic plan.
Right. We don't. And that I will say that part of it is a little complicated because the funding has there's state funding involved. There's federal funding involved, and federal funding comes to us by parts. And so instead of just here's your budget, spend it how you need to, I will point out one very specific program that is a perfect example of this. As you go through the spreadsheet and are learning more about this, you'll see in many cases we tried to get pretty close to where they were last year. Some are lower simply because we know we're going to be receiving a lower amount of funds. However, in at the bottom of your first page, oh no, excuse me, that's not them. Actually, it is. There are two here. There are two examples. Health promotion partners at the bottom of your first page, and the Pearls program is the next to the last on the second page. You can see that there are proposed funding actually matches their request, and that is a perfect example of where that specific funding part can only be used for very specific services. And so to make sure that we use those funds accordingly, their request gets matched because they can't be funded from any other part, and those funds can't be used for any other services. So that's a good example of why you might see something like that. But yeah, I appreciate that. And that is, while we don't get into the specifics of how the funding gets matched, it ultimately comes back. We point right back to our 4-year plan process, which ultimately is our strategic plan. And that's what the SRS is also reviewing. They're reviewing our 4-year plan and helping track our programs, our services, and ultimately feeds back and ties into the funding process. So it's definitely all there. And so I appreciate that question.
Thank you.
Certainly. Oh, yes. Someone got you the book. Great. Thank you.
Yes. Like,
All right.
like I said, it would be helpful to me as a new member to make sure that we're following. I have faith in the subcommittee. It's just when you're asking me to vote, to make a recommendation, if I can see those numbers, it would be easier for me.
Got it. Sure. So the other thing too, and I'll share this with all members as a reminder, we do not vote line by line. We do one overall bottom line vote. So just as you're reviewing this, if you have any questions of us as staff, we are happy to answer questions on that. Any other questions from members of the RAC? All right, hearing none at this time, Madam Chair, I'm going to hand it back to you. Actually, you know what? I'm next on the agenda.
You are, because our presenters are not here yet.
Not here yet, and I can be brief and we'll watch for them. So I will continue here with my director's report. It's been a busy month since we last met towards the end of January. I just want to share that I had opportunity several times in January also on February 1st to provide testimony before the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. Very exciting that Senate Bill 24-40, which is requesting an increase to state fund for senior services, did pass 8-1. And while it was not a unanimous vote, it was certainly a very positive vote. It was very encouraging to hear our representatives and legislators respond not just with an aye, but an absolutely yes. We need this increase. And so it was really nice to hear members of the Health and Human Services Committee be so positive in their positive votes. There's also and then on February 1st, I had the opportunity to testify before the Joint Budget Committee. committee. In fact, I left right after the TRS meeting, and so we haven't had a chance to share about that. But this was an overall joint budget committee public comment period for folks to share their encouragement for their specific programs across the state. And so I was really privileged to be able to share the need for increased services increased funding for the state fund for senior services. And for those of you who may not have heard this, I think I had shared this at a previous meeting, but when we talk about AAA funding, as I mentioned earlier in my report, AAA funding is a combination of state funding from the Older Coloradans Act and federal funding from the Older Americans Act. And at the state level, the Older Coloradans Act is the actual act that we follow that provides the mandates and requirements of how we use the funds. But when we talk about it at the budget level, it's called the State Fund for Senior Services. And so if you hear us talk about AAA funding or Older Coloradans Act, we talk about the State Fund for Senior Services, we're ultimately talking about those specific funds and where they play a part in the process. That was a 3-minute testimony. There were no votes taken at that time. However, I will share that House Bill 24-1211 was brought before the House by 4 members of the Joint Budget Committee, and so as a bipartisan act request, and it's essentially building out a $200,000 per year emergency contingency fund for AAAs to access funds in times of emergency. Now, there are some very specific requirements already built into the bill as to what accounts for an emergency, but the fact remains that this is in play already. In fact, it was drafted and went before the House for 3 readings so swiftly that we found out about it after those 3 readings, and they have passed. It has now passed the Senate, and we expect that to go before the governor for signature really at any time. So it's moving quite swiftly. The overall the overarching bill there, again, that's House Bill 24-1211. That emergency fund is a rollover fund through January of 2029. And so it's not just a single year bill. It would allow for review before that bill comes up to sunset at 2029. And so more to come on that as we hear more and how we might need to access those funds. I will reiterate the Senate Bill 24-040 that increased the state fund for senior services. It has a 1-year $500,000 increase for across the state to AAAs, but it also includes a component of annual inflation increase, as well as a triennial review with reporting required back to the JBC, and that is related directly to the funding adequacy for senior services. The last thing I'll share in my update this time is last night was just a wonderful opportunity for members of the community to celebrate the space that has been renovated over at the Silver Key campus, and it was specifically the NAMI space. That's a National Alliance on Mental Illness. We, as the Area Agency on Aging and the TRS members, had the privilege to approve $260,000 to help with the renovation of that space. And it ultimately it really doubled the space that Silver Key had been hosting with NAMI, doubled that space when the other tenant moved out. It was a completely a remodel of the space. And so now there's offices, there's training room, there's new restrooms, there's information and room where folks can come in and pick up materials for access to resources in the community. And so we were really excited to be able to be part of that open house last night. Our executive director, Andy Gunning, and myself had the opportunity to attend that last night. It was very well done. It's just a beautiful space, and I think that ultimately will serve many in our community, and especially from our standpoint, our older adults who deal with mental illness in so many ways. And so, as part of the thank you for the funding and for being able to attend, there were prints made from an artist who has a larger painting in their front lobby. And I know those of you online won't really be able to see it, but this will be hung here in the room, here in the first floor somewhere. But this beautiful image of Colorado Springs with Garden of the Gods and the mountains in the background and Pikes Peak. And there's a plaque on the front that says, "Thank you for supporting NAMI, artwork by Lelia Davis, February 2024. So next time you're in the building, please ask where to see that painting. And we just know that so many seniors will be able to continue to be served through that remodeling of that space to make that a welcoming space for those in the community that suffer with mental illness. And so Jason and Lori and Dr. Johnson were also there, and we just thank them so much for the opportunity to collaborate with Silver Key to put these ARPA funds toward a project that our regular base state and federal funding just doesn't have room for and doesn't allow for. And so we've been really excited to hear about some of the projects that the ARPA funds are supporting, and that'll be a presentation for another day. So thank you so much, Madam Chair. I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jody. And I see that our presenters are now here. And from the Colorado Springs Fire Department. And I don't have your last names, but your first names are Cheyenne and Steve, and they're representing the Aging in Place program, which, as Jody mentioned earlier, will be a new provider. So if you could come up to the mic and share a little information with us.
Perfect. So my understanding is we have 15 minutes or so to kind of present some background.
Yep.
Right. I brought with me if you want my hand out, I brought with me a PowerPoint slide deck because that's easier than trying to navigate some of the technology that we have these days. And I'll wait till Cheyenne gets those handed out and brings one back to me. So I'm Steve Johnson. I'm the administrator at the Colorado Springs Fire Department, Community and Public Health Division. And yeah, you can hand them out. Anybody who's here that wants to know more. I wanted to start by just giving some history of who we are and what we do and how that's changed over time. So we started in 2012. Dr. Johnson has a lot of history with what we've been doing over time because she was our medical director for quite some time period. But in 2012, the fire department said we have a lot of folks that call a lot and they need help, but they need a different kind of help. So at the time, Dr. Bronsky and one of the firefighters identified what those needs were, what could help them, and that started our existence as a intensive navigation program that very quickly roped in the mental health side to the physical health side of things. And within a couple of years, there's an identification made for need for a mental health response that was different because 98% of the time, if you called 911 for a suicide or a mental health issue, you went to the fire, to the, via the fire department to the emergency department, where you either were put back on the street or you waited for a long time to go to the right place. And so that started our community response team, which then with the police department and with Diversus Health and one of our paramedics gets people to where they need to go quickly. So about 60% of the time they're able to stay at home. And then part of the time we can take them directly to the crisis walk-in center or direct them to a psychiatric facility. And they only need to go to the hospital about 20% of the time. So that was really what set us on the trail of doing this kind of work. I came in 2018, February of 2018, and we identified that really there were a lot of needs and we were just focused on those two populations. And so we started looking at how we could focus in more intensely on certain types of populations. And one of the first things we did actually was aging in place. So we identified that, and I obviously won't cover every piece of these slide decks or it'd take a ton of time. What we identified early on is we had a lot of individuals who were falling, right? And a fall is a sign of a lot of bad things to come for someone who's aging. Firefighters would go and do a lift assist, and we thought we can identify individuals and we can help them. So we worked with the Next 50 to do an initial pilot around this idea. And I wanted to share some of the data from that original because some of those same things haven't changed, right? I don't mean data, but the need, because part of this is what is our need now and what can we do to fill the gaps? Really, one of our challenges as a city is the fact that when we looked at the 65 plus population, when we look at the report from the age-friendly Colorado Springs, that we see that the number of folks that are aging 55 and up is going to go up dramatically from 17% in 2020 all the way up to I think it's 40% in 2040. That's not on the slide deck. I have that from a previous grant, but I'd be happy to share this with you as well. But you see that going from almost doubling over that time period of 30 years. So when we looked at that, we looked at some of the other reporting data from that, from some things done by the age-friendly Pikes Peak. We looked at some things that were done by the aging in the Pikes Peak region. So those were the three that we leaned on, and we saw people really want to stay at home. And that number is just going to really accelerate in the next, well, now 15 years, as the baby boomers continue to come into that retirement age. And the number above 85 is going to accelerate. I think triple is what they were predicting at that time. So we had the idea of, we're already seeing this, it's going to get more. How do we get ahead of that? How can we start to build a plan that we can scale over time? And so that's what we did in 2019. And the Next 50 came alongside for the initial start. And then we have stayed in that space. The one unfortunate thing is we haven't been able to grow it more. And that's what we really need to do, because since 2019, in just those 5 years, we're starting to see a growth in that need from the fire department side. And we're not even really publicizing this a lot because we don't have the enough people to do it. And so this grant came open and we were very excited about it. Cheyenne brought it to me. We were very excited about that because it gives us the opportunity. We hope to begin to start moving into adding another person. Maybe 3 months ago, about the time we applied, Cheyenne had 40 people that she was helping and 40 that were waiting. And so we have way more than we can handle. And like I said, we haven't even gone out there and really made a big publication. They come to us either through the fire department or through a pilot that we're doing with one of the hospitals around individuals who are stuck in the hospital because they have nobody to help navigate them either back to home or into a longer term care facility. So, and then there's a smaller population that is, we think they can do well if we could get them through the first 2 weeks. And so Cheyenne's able to help them because they have just to make sure they do everything right and get connected well, and then they can do well. So we're doing some of that piloting as well. So that's kind of the big picture of where we're at. We also then moved into the space of working with homeless on the trails and in the camps, doing intensive navigation, working with folks coming out of the jail with substance abuse, severe mental illness, homelessness, because at that point they're in a good spot because they're off of their, they're not using drugs at that point. They're tuned up physically and on their mental health. And if we can move them then into a better place, we can help keep them on the right track. And those are the primary areas that we're operating in right now. A lot around navigation and response to people in crisis. I don't want to miss as an overview, and then I'm going to have Cheyenne tell you a couple of stories. But if you flip back to the overview piece, a lot of departments from across the country have come to visit and see the different types of work that we're doing. I know my list is not complete there. I have not been able to keep up with it. It's pretty complete, but probably 50, 60 different departments from across the country have come. Number of publications for the work, a couple of awards, most recently the Congressional Fire Service Award for Innovation in Tiered Response. For our department, for all the different work we're doing across the continuum of care to help people who are really oftentimes overseen and overlooked and need someone to come walk beside them and help get their feet under them and help them get in the place that they need to be. So one thing that happened this morning, I came in and I had a call from the dispatcher over at 911 who said, "Hey, can you help us? This person has been calling a lot and they're in danger of 911 abuse, and we think that she probably is struggling with some type of maybe dementia or Alzheimer's." So I sent it over to Cheyenne. We pulled it up. She's made 43 calls in the last since January 1st to 911, and she thinks there's a plumbing issue in her house. Her granddaughter lives with her, but it seems to be accelerating and getting more challenging. So Cheyenne has her new best friend starting today, but 43 calls to 911 because she's got that belief and they've talked to her and she's like, "I promise I won't call again." But of course she does, typically at night. And that just, even this morning, represents the individuals that we will then go out and work with and help. And she probably needs to get into a long-term facility, and Cheyenne steps in and helps make all of that work happen. As we're walking in the door right now, talking to somebody about an individual that trusts this person to help get them into longer-term care. So I know Cheyenne has a story for you, and then we'll kind of close it up.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Cheyenne. I'm a paramedic medical navigator for the fire department. I've been here 2.5 years, and this story just sticks out with me in the last 2.5 years of clients that we have served. And I came to this lady by way of her husband. Her husband was falling frequently, and the fire department was like, they're both aging and she can't pick him up anymore, and his health is declining, and they really could use some support. So I went out to the house and met with them. He happened to be in the hospital at the time. And I kind of helped walk her through the things that we needed to get started for him, some long-term care Medicaid, home health care, how can we get these things, food services, just resources within the community. And while he was in the hospital, unfortunately, he was diagnosed with end-stage cancer, and that was part of the reason he was falling, is he was so weak. And he was discharged on hospice. Hospice had him all set up, and he unfortunately passed in the home. 2 weeks later, I called to contact them and follow up and make sure things were going well. And they were like, "Unfortunately, he has passed, but my mom needs some help," and the family wanted some help. So I met with them, and 2 weeks after her husband died, she had a pretty significant stroke and ended up in the hospital herself. And she was not able to live at home anymore, so she moved in with her son. I met with them, walked them through how to get long-term care Medicaid so they can get some more support in the home. How could they get a primary care provider to visit with her, because she didn't have one at all. So we got them set up with Bloom. I just met with them yesterday. She is now walking on her own. She can transfer to the bathroom by herself. She doesn't need her son's support. She just happens to live there and loves it because she gets to love on her grandbaby who's 8 months old. So that's great for her. But the family was super thankful because the healthcare provider, the primary care provider we got them, had found a heart condition and was able to change her medications that nobody had found in over 30 years of her going to the doctor. And
she now can have a full and great life. And while she's one of the great stories of somebody I got to keep at home, there are unfortunately people who we have to help navigate getting to an assisted living or skilled nursing home, things like that. And being able to do that for them, because it's so complicated and so time consuming, which it shouldn't be, is an amazing thing for us to be able to do. So we really appreciate you guys listening to our story and the opportunity for the grant.
So yeah, Jason told me he talked a little bit about our partnership too before he got here, which was really great as well. So a lot of community partnerships listed here. What questions do you have for us?
I will share briefly, those of you online, we did scan this really quickly, and so this will be part of the update. You'll be able to see the full handout that they provided to us, even though it wasn't really used as part of the presentation, but you'll be able to see that as well. Any questions?
Thank you, Jared.
Yeah, thank you. Jared's a whiz here.
It's like, wow, I didn't
and
know that
Laura,
happened.
Yeah, teamwork. Laura and Jared made it happen.
When
I see, Mary, you have your hand raised.
I do. I have a question. I know this is a Colorado Springs program, but do people have to prove that they live in a Colorado zip code, a Colorado Springs zip code, in order to augment these services to their lives?
No, we typically operate within the boundaries of the city, but in this type of a program, we're willing to go out and sometimes to go out farther into the county. So it's not that we would say no to someone a little farther out, but it can become more of a challenge in terms of transportation. Right now, as I have is Cheyenne. So if I have her driving too many miles, then she can't see as many other people to assist them. So there's just some practical pieces. If we do go into another jurisdiction, we may at times need just to give them a heads up that we're in their jurisdiction for another fire department. But we do manage some people outside of the Springs, like say Peyton or Falcon.
Fountain, one of your areas that you can help?
Yeah, we could go to Fountain.
Okay, that's good to know. But I heard you, it makes it sound like there's like a partnership or a brotherhood. If you get called by somebody who doesn't live in the Springs and you really can't help them, do you actually forward that information to the right fire district?
Well, so in our case, the referrals typically come either from the hospital and when the person's discharging or needs help, or it comes from our fire department. We don't have a mechanism to have people calling just and saying, I know somebody, because we don't have the funding to be able to take on all comers.
No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I did not mean that. I meant if someone calls you and it's a bona fide request that meets with what you can do, but that person does not live in a Colorado Springs zip code, do you forward that information to a district that can help?
We could do that. It hasn't happened and nobody really does what we do. So I wouldn't have anybody to refer them to. I mean, in theory we could, but there's no other aging in place navigation program in a fire department like what we're doing that I'm even aware of.
Sounds like a fantastic program. We'll wait for it.
I do have a question. I know your resources are stretched. Suggestion, clone Cheyenne and, make her available to those of us outside of the Colorado Springs zip code. But seriously, is there a way, understanding that your resources are very thin, to perhaps make this presentation to other fire departments? I'm from Monument. So I'm, I don't know if that's a possibility or if that's something you've considered, or
for us to do the program in Monument or to talk with them about the program.
Number two.
Oh, we'll present to anybody. We present all the time.
Monument has come and rode with us.
Have they? Okay.
Yeah. Recently Monument was out with us, and we will go to Monument. So if they're let me
Jump in there.
if they're a super utilizer of the hospital system, then, which they probably are because, and usually they go hand in hand, right? They're a super utilizer of the hospital and the 911 systems. But if they're outside of our jurisdiction and the hospital picks them up, which they're really good about doing, we will go to Monument. Monument is in the process of starting a program. I don't know what it looks like because they just came and rode with us less than a year ago. So I can't speak to what their program is going to look like, but I do know that they have come and rode with us and we will go see patients in Monument. And I've had a couple where the fire department will call from a different jurisdiction and say, I need some help. I don't know where to go with this person. And we can either I can give them advice on where to go, or I can go see the patient and do a quick, hey, this is what you need. Here's my number if you have more questions. I don't mind doing that.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And thank you for what you do.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And I just want to add as chair, I think it's great to have a new provider that we're going to learn more about, but that you'll be able to learn more about our entire network. Then that'll hopefully enhance some of the information that you're giving the folks that you're coming in contact with.
Yes, definitely.
Melissa.
Thank you. So Cheyenne, I have, I think, 2 questions for you. The first is when you did the ride in Monument, was that ride specifically kind of thinking about older adults, super utilizers in Monument, or was it kind of the full spectrum when you
I think it was the full spectrum.
Okay.
I honestly cannot remember it was one paramedic that came out and talked with us.
Okay.
And I don't remember what their plan was. I could touch base with her again and kind of see and then get back to you all.
Yeah, I'm just I'm super interested to know if the folks up in Monument, our member Laura Cronick over there is on the city council for Monument. And so I'm just kind of curious if, the emergency responders up there have been tracking older adults calling and are super worried, or if it's, kind of the full spectrum. So I am just curious. So you can get back with me later.
I can get back with you. I'll reach out to her and see kind of what they're looking at for.
Yeah. And then the second thing is when you have the folks so it's kind of a twofold question. When you have the folks, and this is specifically older adults, the super utilizer older adult individuals, when they've called or the hospital is called and there's a need, and you mentioned that you have a wait list, that you can't serve everybody. So is there a way that you're triaging some of those calls, number one? And then the second part is what do you do with those folks that kind of like you can't serve? So, where are they going?
So what I do is that we have a charting system. It comes in, I kind of look at what it is. So it's helpful for our people who are doing their referrals to really put in a good narrative of why they're referring them to our program. If we cannot serve them immediately, I try to look at, do they have an immediate need? Is this going to get worse? Like this lady who has 43 calls, we're going to go see her today and figure out what is going on and why we can't do that. But the other folks, I can refer obviously out to Silver Key and see if they qualify for some case management assistance. I can try to give them something quickly. I do know now that I learned recently is that the Area Agency on Aging has some case navigation that we can get some help from them as well. So that would be the plan, is to kind of disperse those people and then check back with them if they're not getting what they need.
I will also mention that sometimes when the Area Agency on Aging has gotten really challenging calls from individuals, we have leaned back on the fire department and said, fire department, will you go out and check on this person? We think that they're in, imminent danger, or we call APS as well. But it's just amazing the resource that you guys have. And I'd always thought that this Aging in Place program has been around since the dawn of time when CARES first started. So for me to learn that it really has only been around for a short period of time is very interesting to know. And in the short period of time that it's been in place, I think it's just been an amazing resource. So
thank you.
Previous to that, everyone just kind of came in a big funnel, right? It's like, and they just kind of got assigned and there was no intentionality to have a person who's an expert in that area instead of being a jack of all trades. And then to really focus in on how do we get that population directly.
And I think for us, our program is very unique because we actually go into the home, and a lot of the case managers are not. So you might get that phone call that they're like, I'm great, I'm doing fine, I get everything I need. And then you go to the house and you're like, oh my goodness, that is not even close to the case. Like, so I think that's unique about our program and really helpful. Because then we can collaborate with our partners and say, no, that's really not the case. We need to put some services, figure out how to convince them that these services are the best option for them, for their health and safety. Yes, sir.
How do you work with the Beacon teams?
I have only worked with Beacon once on a patient who was in their district. And we worked really closely with them for this patient. And that would be my only experience with Beacon.
You're talking about the county co-responder unit?
There's one in the county, and then Fountain also has 2
Yeah.
units.
They have
So-
multiple. So just so that we work with them through the CRT capacity a little bit more than we do in this. And there's no reason they couldn't call us and make a referral. Later today, we have our monthly behavioral health control committee meeting. They're part of that, along with our CRT units, mental health hospitals, physical health hospitals. So we're all in the same milieu together. And certainly we've gotten referrals for different things in the past from them. And we would welcome that if it's within our area.
I'm more concerned with, you're saying you're stretched, you have people on waiting lists, you don't have the resources. If you get a call for service or a request from Fountain, I would encourage you to refer it to the Fountain Beacon team for them to work on to help you rather than increase your load.
Right. Gotcha.
Any other questions, concerns? Thank you so much. Oh,
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say, I know, your requests, what we've proposed, because we're still going through the approval process, but the amount that we set aside to be able to help with this, I know is nowhere near the request. And when I called Steve, he said, it's like a game of Tetris. You just figure out how, I figure out all these parts and figure out how it fits together. So I'm just really excited for this new partnership, a little more formalized partnership, so that we can continue to collaborate across our region, and with partners like Silver Key and so many others, where we'll be able to really have a more formal partnership and engaging with our community. So thank you very much for taking the time to be here today. It sounds like a very busy day for you all. Looks like, Madam Chair, we have another question maybe from Member Mary.
Put your
You're on
hand
mute,
on.
Mary.
I'm not familiar with Beacon. What does that stand for?
I'm probably going to mess this up, but it's Behavioral Health Connect team. It pairs a licensed caseworker with an officer, and they respond to people in crisis who get referred to the police. For example, there's a domestic dispute. Rather than sending the police in and arresting somebody, we will send a Beacon team in. They will go in, the police will clear the area and make sure that no one's in any danger of harming themselves or the clinician. Then the clinician goes in and works with the couple to try and resolve the problem without having someone going to jail. Hopefully I got that right, or am I out in left field?
You're pretty close. Yeah, I mean, that's not our program, but yeah, that's the idea, is to go to a crisis and give them what they need, which is help within the crisis, not to go to jail, and then get them connected into services. So you nailed it.
Yes.
I can't remember the name of it technically either, so we're both in the same boat there.
Hopefully that answers your question, ma'am.
Well, it certainly gives me more knowledge. Thank you.
Hey, Mary,
good.
this is Marie. I just added the link to it's Behavioral Health Connect Unit, so you were right. But I just added the link in the chat for more information.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Well, thanks for having us, giving us the opportunity to come and present, to put a grant in. We would love to work together and partner and then just see how it grows over the years, because we're not leaving this work. And we're always looking, from my side too, long-term wise, I'm always working with the city to try to increase the amount they're funding. And we have multiple grant partners that we work with, but this is a program that I can't imagine will go anywhere. It's just a question of how do we keep it going and how do we grow it to meet the needs. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to highlight the meeting schedule. It's on your sheet. Our next RAC meeting is March 28th, 2024, and we have a RAC executive meeting, which is the heads of all of the subcommittees, and that's March 6th. It's always the first Wednesday of the month.
Keep going, Debbie. I'll follow up in a second.
Okay. And then I think we also provide the PPACG schedule. Melissa?
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to mention that our last RAC meeting in January, because it was the end of January, we had some information shared about Black History Month. And I wanted to just take a minute and follow up, because I don't think we mentioned yet today before we close the meeting.
To do.
Okay, so I'll let Jody take it from here before we close the meeting, because there's some pretty neat things going on in here right now. So go ahead, Jody.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melissa. Yes, I was racking my brain for the artist name because it's I have it here. Yeah, Jared helped me, so appreciate it. So for those of you who are in the room, and those of you who may be coming in here in the next few weeks, in recognition of Black History Month for the month of February, our HR manager did connect with a local African American artist, and you can see there are 3 pieces here in the room. Excuse me, 4 pieces here in the room, as well as one in our lobby downstairs. The one in the lobby is in the seating area. It's a balance rock in the Garden of the Gods, and then there are 4 pieces here. One is a beautiful rendition of the flag on Iwo Jima, and we have some beautiful aspen. It actually looks like a photograph, but it's a painting, and then 2 pieces behind us of an owl and a pair of wolves, and these are just gorgeous pieces. The artist is Daniel Logan. He is local to Colorado Springs, and he will be holding these pieces here for a while. And our HR manager, Sherry Hoffman, is looking for additional artists to continue to brighten up this space in our public space. And so we just want to thank her for taking that time to connect, and especially for the month of February to connect with artist Daniel Logan. So there are prints available. These paintings are actually available for sale, or you can connect with him regarding purchasing prints of these paintings. And so just wanted to highlight that. Thank you very much, Melissa, for that intro. And just wanted to also, one last thing, before I hand this back, as despite the positive notes within the Senate bill and the House bill, and the positive responses we've been receiving from our legislators, especially in the Senate bill, it is now going to be sitting for about 6 weeks, give or take, within the appropriations process. And so I would encourage you, if you did not reach out with that letter that we had provided, that you still take time to do that. We want to make sure that we don't get forgotten, that we don't get moved to the bottom of the proverbial paperwork pile, and that you do make those phone calls, you provide that letter, customize it to personalize it either to your community's needs or your services providers needs, or if you want to connect with me to get some ideas of what to say within an email or a phone call, I would be very happy to coach you along in that. But I do want to reiterate that it's going to be sitting there while dozens and dozens and dozens more bills come before our Senate and House members and the JBC. And so we want to make sure that this increase for senior services does not get lost in the shuffle. So please reach out. I would also make the same invitation I made earlier, is if we have opportunity to go back to Denver for testimony on any of these that are currently in place or future, I would invite you to join me. I'm happy to make that drive for this purpose, and would love to have company. Even if you're just watching the process, you want to see how the sausage is made, I tell you what, this is a good place to watch. But if you want to just accompany, whether you're going to testify or not, I would invite you to come with me. And as I've been doing by email, I will be letting our committees as well as our providers know when I'm going up. And sometimes it's last minute, I get that. But if you're available, you are most welcome to accompany me. Maria, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know that on March 7th, it's up at the Capitol. There's going to be Disability Rights Day. Sorry, it is Disability Rights Advocacy Day. And so a bunch of us from the Independence Center are going to be up at the Capitol talking to legislators and advocating for people with disabilities. So just wanted to let everyone know about that. And I didn't know if you were going to be at that, Jody. So also asking if anyone from PPACG was going to be there.
Yeah, thank you. If you would send us some information on that, we will share that out with staff and with the RAC members, and we'll see how that. I don't have that on my calendar right now, but thank you for highlighting that.
Sure, thank you.
Looks like Mary's got another.
Yeah, if I might.
Mary?
On March 29th is the final of a 50-year celebration of the Vietnam War ending. Many, of course, of our Vietnam vets are aging Americans, and they might want to know about this through your agencies for people that are here. That ceremony is at 10 o'clock on March 29th at the Pikes Peak National Veterans Cemetery.
Thank you, Mary. And before I adjourn the meeting, I didn't really have a chair report, but I do want to thank everybody for putting up with my first leading of the meeting. I will try to do better next time, but thank you all. And I am going to adjourn the meeting.